If you are an unmarried provider, a single parent, or part of the sandwich generation supporting aging parents, this episode is built for you. We know that understanding financial choices is a pillar of our secured framework, and choosing between filing as head of household versus single is one of the most impactful choices you can make. Providing support is often more important than shared residency, especially for those taking care of parents. And not every dependent creates a tax break. Simply living with a friend or partner doesn't necessarily change your head of household tax status. It's time to stop guessing and start knowing. Let's get into the details. I want to talk to the responsible providers out there. If you are unmarried, but you're the financial anchor for your family, this segment is crucial for you. We're diving into the financial foundation, why head of household matters. Now, if you've been filing your taxes as single or married filing separately, just because it seemed like the default choice, you might want to grab a pen. The head of household tax status is a strategic alternative designed specifically for unmarried people who support dependents. Think of it this way. The tax code recognizes that it costs more to run a home for a family than it does for just one person. Because of that, filing as head of household offers some serious financial incentives. We're talking about a significantly higher standard deduction, which directly lowers your taxable income, and much friendlier tax brackets compared to filing as single. It's essentially the IRS saying, "We see the heavy lifting you're doing, and here is a break." But as with anything tax-related, you can't just check the box because it sounds nice. You have to meet the specific head of household requirements. I like to visualize eligibility like a three-legged stool. If you're missing one leg, the whole thing falls over. Leg number 1. You must be unmarried or considered unmarried on the last day of the year. Now, this is a common question I get. Alex, I'm separated but not divorced yet. Do I have to file married filing separately? Not necessarily. If you file a separate return and your spouse didn't live in your home for the last 6 months of the year, the IRS might consider you unmarried for tax purposes. Leg number 2. You must provide more than half the cost of keeping up the home. I want you to reflect on your own checkbook for a second. When we say keeping up the home, we aren't talking about buying your teenager a new PlayStation or paying for their clothing. The IRS looks at the household basics: rent, mortgage interest, real estate taxes, home insurance, utilities, repairs, and food eaten in the home. If you are the one paying 51% or more of those specific bills, you've met this requirement. And finally, leg number 3. You must have a qualifying person living with you for more than half the year. This is where people get tripped up. It's not just about having a roommate or a partner living with you. Finding the correct qualifying person for head of household comes down to relationship and legal responsibility, which we are going to break down in detail in the next few segments. So here is the big question: head of household versus single, which one are you? If you are a single parent, or maybe you're in the sandwich generation taking care of an aging parent, you are doing the hard work. You need to make sure your tax return reflects that reality. Here is your safe, simple, sound takeaway. Don't leave money on the table out of habit. My call to action for you today is simple. Go dig up your tax return from last year. Look at the filing status box at the top of the page. Did you file as single when you actually met the criteria for head of household? Or, conversely, did you file head of household without actually paying more than half the household costs? Getting this right is the bedrock of your tax health. Now, I mentioned that qualifying person test earlier. It sounds simple, but what happens if you have shared custody? Or if your child is actually away at college? Stick around because next up, we're going to dissect the specific rules regarding children, residency, and avoiding the dreaded custody trap. So let's dive into our next focus, the qualifying child. Now, when the IRS looks at your tax return, they aren't just taking your word for it. They are running your child through a specific set of tests. Think of this like a three-legged stool. If one leg is missing, the head of household status topples over. First, there's the relationship test. This is usually the easy one. To be a qualifying child, they need to be your son, daughter, stepchild, foster child, or a descendant of any of them, like your grandchild. Interestingly, a younger sibling or half-sibling can also count here. Second is age. Generally, they need to be under age 19 or under age 24 if they are a full-time student. Though keep in mind, if your child is permanently and totally disabled, the age limit disappears entirely. But the third leg of the stool is where people trip up. It's residency. To be a qualifying person for head of household, that child must live with you for more than half the year. That means more than 6 months. This is a strict rule. I want to pause here because there is a critical distinction we need to make. We often use the terms dependent and qualifying person interchangeably, but in the eyes of the IRS, they are different things. For example, let's look at the support test. For a qualifying child, the rule isn't necessarily that you provided more than half their support. It's that they didn't provide more than half of their own support. But here is the real kicker. You can claim a child as a dependent without being head of household. This brings us to what I call the Form 8332 trap. I need all my divorced, separated, or co-parenting listeners to really lean in on this one. It is incredibly common in divorce decrees to trade off years claiming the child. You get even years. Your ex gets odd years. You might sign Form 8332, which is a waiver allowing the non-custodial parent to claim the child as a dependent. Here is the trap. Form 8332 allows the non-custodial parent to get the child tax credit and the dependent exemption. But, and this is a huge but, it does not give you head of household status. You generally cannot trade head of household status in a divorce agreement. The IRS doesn't care what your lawyer wrote in the settlement, they care about where the child slept. So ask yourself, in your shared custody arrangement, how many nights did your child sleep at your home? If your child spent 183 nights with your ex and 182 nights with you, your ex is the custodial parent for tax purposes. Even if you hold a Form 8332 waiver that lets you claim the child as a dependent, you usually cannot file as head of household because you failed the residency test. The child didn't live with you for more than half the year. This is a massive red flag area for audits. The IRS computers are very good at catching when two parents try to claim HOH for the same child or when a non-custodial parent tries to claim it. So, take a moment to reflect on your last year. Did your filing status match your physical reality? If you're the one buying the groceries and paying the rent, make sure you have the residency days to back up that tax benefit. Here is your takeaway and call to action. If you are divorced or separated, review your custody agreements and Form 8332 status immediately. Ensure your filing expectations match the actual IRS residency rules, not just what you verbally agreed to with your ex-spouse. Count the nights, check the log, and make sure you qualify before you file. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Alex, I don't have children, but I'm taking care of my aging mom, or I'm supporting my younger brother. Can you still file as head of household? The answer is maybe, and the rules for adults are completely different than the rules for kids. Up next, we're going to talk about the sandwich generation and how supporting parents and relatives impacts your taxes. We hear the term sandwich generation a lot, right? You might be in your 40s or 50s, feeling squeezed between raising your own children and caring for aging parents. Or maybe you're the designated support system for a sibling or a niece. It's emotionally tough, and financially, it can feel like a marathon. But here is where the tax code actually throws you a lifeline. We need to talk about the qualifying relative rules and how they apply to your head of household requirements. Now, you might assume you need a child to file as head of household. That is a common myth. You can actually qualify if you are supporting extended family members, like a brother, a sister, or even a niece or nephew. But the IRS has a very strict financial ruler they use here. It's called the gross income test. For a relative to qualify you as head of household for the 2024 tax year, that person cannot have a gross income of more than $5,050. I want you to pause and think about that number. It's low, right? This is where it gets complicated for families. If your brother lives with you and works a part-time job, or your aunt has a small pension, even a modest amount of income can disqualify them from being your dependent. And if they aren't your dependent, they generally can't qualify you for head of household. So before you file, you have to look at their W-2s, not just yours. But let's pivot to the absolute game changer in this section. It's what I call the golden rule for adult children, the parent exception. This is easily one of the most valuable, yet totally overlooked strategies for anyone supporting an aging mother or father. Here is the scenario. You're single, you work hard, and you pay for your mom's assisted living facility. Or maybe you pay the rent and utilities for her apartment across town. She doesn't live with you, so you assume you have to file as single, right? Wrong. Parents are the only exception to the residency rule. Unlike a child who has to live with you for half the year, or a sibling who has to live with you for the entire year, your parent does not have to live under your roof for you to claim head of household. As long as you are paying more than half the cost of keeping up their home, whether that's a house, an apartment, or a nursing home, you can still get the tax benefits of head of household status. It's a massive distinction. Let's break down that residency requirement one last time because it trips people up constantly. Your kids need to live with you for more than 6 months. Your parents do not need to live with you at all, provided you pay for their housing and upkeep. Everyone else, aunts, uncles, siblings, must live with you for the entire year, 365 days, to qualify you. So if you are the financial backbone of your family, don't leave money on the table. Here is your safe, simple, sound action item for this week. I want you to sit down and do the math. Calculate the total support you provide for your aging parents. Tally up the rent, the utilities, the groceries, and the medical costs you cover. Compare that against their own income and expenses. If you are paying more than 50% of their total upkeep, you likely meet the threshold for the parent exception. However, just because you're paying the bills doesn't mean everyone living in your house helps you on your taxes. Next up, we're going to talk about the red flags. We'll look at why your boyfriend, girlfriend, or even your favorite cousin might act like family, but don't count as family in the eyes of the IRS. Head of household requirements are strict. It's not just about who you love or who you feed, it's about specific legal relationships. Here's the most common scenario I see. You are living with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a best friend. Maybe they are going through a rough patch, or maybe they just don't work. You are paying the rent, the utilities, the groceries, everything. You are covering 100% of their life. Now, on your tax return, you might be able to claim them as a dependent if they make very little money. But, and this is a massive but, does my boyfriend qualify me for head of household? Or your girlfriend or your roommate? The answer is a hard no. The IRS draws a very distinct line here. To get that head of household status, which remember gives you that higher standard deduction and better tax brackets, the person you are supporting generally needs to be related to you by blood, marriage, or adoption. A romantic partner or a roommate, no matter how much you support them financially, does not unlock the HOH status. You're stuck filing single. And speaking of relatives, let's talk about the cousin rule. This one catches people off guard all the time. You might have a cousin living with you for the entire year. You're supporting them fully. In your heart, that's close family. But in the eyes of the tax code, a cousin isn't considered a close enough relative to trigger head of household status unless you have legally adopted them or they are a foster placement. So before you file, ask yourself, can I claim my cousin for head of household? If the answer is no, they are just staying with me, you need to step back to the single filing status to stay safe. Now let's pivot to the safe part of our podcast philosophy. Let's say you do have a qualifying person, a child, a niece, or a dependent parent. You meet the criteria, that's great. But I have to give you a reality check. Head of household claims are frequently audited. Why? Because the tax savings are significant, so the IRS watches this status like a hawk. They want to verify 2 things. Did you pay more than half the cost of keeping up the home? 2, did that person actually live with you or meet the parent exception? If you get a letter in the mail 2 years from now asking for IRS head of household audit proof, will you be ready? This is where the SAFE strategy comes in. Do not rely on your memory. You need documentation. I'm talking about rent receipts, mortgage statements, utility bills, and grocery receipts. If you have a child in school, keep records that show your address is the one on file with the school district. Think of it like building a fortress around your tax return. The bricks of that fortress are your documents. So here is the takeaway. Qualifying person for head of household rules are about relationship and responsibility. Friends and cousins usually don't cut it, and if you do qualify, you need the paper trail to prove it. Here is your challenge for today, your call to action. I want you to take 5 minutes right now. Create a digital folder on your computer or cloud drive today. Label it Household Proof. Start dropping in PDFs of your utility bills, your lease, and any proof of residency for your dependent. Do it now so you aren't scrambling if the IRS comes knocking later. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the specific rules of filing status. Today, we moved beyond the confusion to understand what the head of household requirements actually look like in real life. We learned that the choice between head of household versus single isn't just a box you check. It's a strategic decision that recognizes the financial heavy lifting you do for your family. Whether you are a single parent deciphering custody rules or a devoted child supporting a parent in a nursing home, correctly identifying your qualifying person for head of household is the key to unlocking a higher standard deduction and potentially thousands in savings. If you take one major thing away from this episode, let it be the parent exception. Remember, you can support an aging parent financially without living under the same roof and still potentially qualify. But as we discussed, keep your records tight. Proof of residency and support is the only way to safeguard your head of household tax status against audits. Thank you so much for trusting me with your time today. If you want to see the summary table we discussed, or grab a checklist for your tax documents, head over to the show notes at safesimplesound.com. If this episode helped clarify your situation, please share it with a friend or family member who might be missing out on these tax benefits. Until next time, stay informed, keep your records simple, and keep your future sound. This is Alex, signing off.